equivalency between racists and Americans standing up to defy hate and bigotry. The President of the United States should say so. Plenty more to talk about, including the President's claim that he's all about waiting for the facts before he actually speaks. And later, the thoughts of the Gold Star father who lived in direct opposition to what seems to be the ultimate no-brainer, denouncing racists with no equivocation. The President refuses to do it, but other Republicans have. Here's what Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado said at a town hall yesterday.
This past weekend was a tragedy when we witnessed people with KKK signs and white supremacist signs and neo-Nazi signs. I will tell you this, those assholes can go back to their cave. We don't want them in this country.
Caesar Khan lives in Charlottesville. His son was killed while serving as a U.S. Army captain in Iraq. Then candidate Trump belittled the Khan family after their appearance at the Democratic National Convention. Caesar Khan joins me now. Mr. Khan, you've lived in Charlottesville with your family since 2005. I'm wondering what your reaction was when you witnessed firsthand the march going through your city.
Anderson, we live in one of the most beautiful, wonderful, peaceful city of United States. When we saw on Friday, I think it's worth making a note. Emancipation Park, where they were to protest, is 1.5 miles from University of Virginia's sacred grounds. These Nazi thugs, they attacked University of Virginia's sacred ground 1.5 miles through this town. I witnessed something that I could not imagine. There was a Nazi flag carried by one person and flag of United States carried by another person in the same group. I thought of thousands of my sons and daughters that died defending that flag. How dare they carry the Nazi flag alongside American flag? And their chants and their slogans all reflect that these Nazis will not be accepted. This is what this city has decided to do, and I urge all cities to decide to do. This was the first nail in the coffin of racism. Racism ended here. It will never rise again. The only work that needs to be done is all communities throughout this country to rise up against this thuggery, against this Nazi, un-American hatred, un-American KKK.
I'm wondering, yes, when you heard the President today basically go back to the same remarks he made last Saturday, saying there was sort of moral equivalence between members of both groups, saying that there was violence on both sides, that there were good people on both sides, good people, including, he was talking about good people marching on Friday night with torches to a Robert E. Lee statue, many of whom were chanting, Jews will not replace us, and other Nazi slogans. What did you think when you heard the President say that?
Look, America is discovering the morally compromised Donald Trump. America is discovering this president will embarrass this great nation again and again and again. The reason is this president is unfit morally and legally to lead this great nation. It is that lack of moral compass, lack of moral leadership that this president continues to utter, and you will see that we have seen that for the last 6 months, his failure after failure after failure, embarrassing this nation throughout the world. I was hoping that maybe once he's elected, once he's in office, that will encourage him, give him some moral compass to stand up and lead this nation and unite us. But he has, one more time, he has embarrassed us and failed us.
Khan, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much. Back now with the panel. Joseph, were you, as a supporter of the President, were you okay with what he said today?
No, I think that what happened today was an American abomination. And I think that what happened today was ultimately worse than what happened on Saturday. I think when you look at it from the perspective,
Trump wants to know facts before he speaks. I mean, let's just be real here. That is absolute
ridiculous,
bull.
laughable.
I mean, that is just bunk. Paris, you cannot say that this president, this man lies more than any president in modern history. There was remember the terrorist attack in Manila? That wasn't a terrorist attack?
There's a difference, Anderson. Years after.
Did he not call out a terrorist attack in the Philippines that turned out not to be a terrorist attack? So when you want to be specific about something where there was violence, don't you think you want to wait for facts? But apparently not in this case. But somehow in this case, he was waiting for the facts.
This case is different, Anderson.
How is
Why?
it so?
I agree with
I would
Paris.
agree.
How?
Yeah.
Because I think
this is
I actually agree with Paris. I think this is much more plain and simple. I think this is about who the United States of America is. This is about hate and bigotry versus what we want to be as a country. This is about white supremacy versus the rest of us. This is about oppression versus those of us who love the fact that people died and gave up so much so that we could have these freedoms. So I actually do think it's a lot more simple than that. I actually do think that it was very easy for the President of the United States to actually be on the right side of history. I don't understand why that's so difficult to be on the right side of history, Paris. That's all I want from any of us.
I think today he's said exactly what he felt, and we all saw it.
Yeah,
the day
that's
before,
what was so fascinating.
Right, the day before, it was a wooden, very scripted, very stiff, no emotion. Today, the emotions
someone
were
on Twitter
out.
called it a hostage video yesterday. I mean, that's
I mean, that's what it looked like. It looked like he was forced. And guess what? Take a look at what some of the neo-Nazis are saying about his speech. Because one of them just put a new statement out that I just saw, just came into my email. He says, Trump defends Charlottesville's Nazis against Jew media lies, condemns Antifa terrorists. He will not be blackmailed into condemning his base. So there you go. That's how neo-Nazis see President Trump. They are clapping for him and saying, giving us a thumbs up, y'all. We're good.
No, actually, they're clapping for you because you're buying into what they're trying to do.
They are not clapping for Sarah Sidner. You better take that back.
No, I won't take it back because what they're doing is you just gave them a platform. You just read their entire message.
No, I didn't. You should see their message. Their message is really strong, and their message gets out to hundreds of thousands of people. So I'm not giving them a platform.
Actually,
their platform
you just gave them. Actually, no. When you read
the idea that
on the record, she didn't say the person's name or their Twitter account. I didn't say the person's name, and I didn't get their account. But I am telling you that this is how white supremacists and neo-Nazis are reading the president's comments.
Not. It's how they're.
How do you know? Do you read their comments?
I don't.
Have you talked to them?
I don't.
Because I haven't. I've spent time with them.
Well, congratulations.
This past week,
I'm glad you spent time with racists, but let me tell you.
I have spent time with them and talked to them because I'm interested in actually what they think and what they're saying so that we can learn how to try and change minds and bring people together.
I'm proud that you talked to racists. But Anderson, this is the point that I've been trying to make, which I haven't been able to make because nobody lets me talk on the show or on this panel. The point is, this is different. When you are talking about something as so divisive as the racial issues that we have in this country, the president wanted to take the time to make sure you had all of the facts because every single word mattered.
You were actually saying with a straight face that this president cares about getting the facts right before speaking, before tweeting about
Anderson,
something.
What I'm talking about
wiretapping in the Trump Tower.
Those things are different.
That doesn't matter. Really, accusing the former president of wiretapping.
What I'm saying is this is a different issue. It's a racial issue. You know what? Everyone talked about the Merck CEO, Merck CEO resigning. Every time they said that, who happens to be African American, the Merck CEO, who happens to be African. But when the rest of the CEOs resigned, I didn't hear people say, who happens to be white.
How many of them did he attack? How many of them did he attack?
How many of them actually did he attack by name?
Did he attack the black one or the rest of them?
He attacked the first one. And actually, he talks about the fact that it was reducing prescription drug prices.
He did go after the man who happened to be African.
Ken Frazier by name. And the fact that he was African American, we cannot deny. Look, my question really is, one, I was wondering earlier how Trump supporters are going to spin this thing.
It's not a
spin.
It
is. I do this.
Think he's a racist?
I think Donald Trump.
Yes or no?
I'm answering the question. I think Donald Trump's traffic and bigotry and racism.
I think Donald Trump's a white supremacist.
No.
I think he led the racist birthday movement.
Simone, very simple. Yes or no?
I think Donald Trump's a white supremacist.
Simone, yes or no? Do you think Donald Trump is a racist?
Well, today,
Simone, do you think Donald Trump is a racist?
I'm scared of Donald Trump? I think Donald Trump traffics in bigotry and racism. I think he's a white supremacist.
Do you think he's a racist? Yes or no?
I don't know what's in his heart, but
Simone,
he looks
because in the
as
green
though,
room, when I asked you about this 2 days ago, you said Donald Trump is not a racist.
I said, I don't think Donald Trump's a racist, that he-
and you can ask me that on camera.
Oh my God! I said I don't know what's in Donald Trump's heart, and I don't think he's a racist.
That's not what you said, Simone.
Bigotry
This is the hypocrisy
and
that I'm talking
racism
about.
and white supremacy.
We know that the man is not a racist.
But ultimately,
Wait a minute. How do you know what is in Donald Trump's heart?
How do you know what's in Donald Trump's heart? To call him a liar.
I'm not saying I know what's in his heart. Wait, one at a time. I'm not saying I know what's in his heart. I'm not claiming to know what's in his heart. I know what comes out of his mouth, and more lies come out of this guy's mouth than any president in modern history.
Well, I think that's a very large statement to make. I don't know who's cataloged all the modern presidents and the lies that they made.
Well, I can tell you, New York Times and a ton of fact checkers have.
But listen,
well, a number of fact checkers, nonpartisan ones, have cataloged the president's unfactual statements. You can't deny that.
Can I peek in here for 1 second? Because I made a statement. I made a statement that I think I need to back it up a little bit. Because for a long period of time, I actually said what Simone said, which is that Donald Trump recognized that a portion of his base peddled in bigotry and racism, and I think that he understood that was a part of his base. So politically, it made sense. It made sense. I firmly believe now, after watching this president, and especially watching his behavior today, and defending and going out of his way to defend, and the way he defended today was by bringing this false moral equivalence between people like Black Lives Matter and neo-Nazis. There is no moral equivalence.
That's true.
There absolutely is no moral equivalence. And so when you look at his history, the totality of his history, the discrimination, the complaints against not only the dealers in Atlantic City, but the Department of Justice and his housing, when you look at the fact you have the Central Park 5, then you can go on and on and on. My African American, you can look at the way that Donald Trump interacts, and yes, I firmly believe wholeheartedly that Donald Trump is a white supremacist in chief. If I get in trouble for it or blowback, so be it. But somebody needs to tell the truth about what he is, and that is what he is.
But that's not. We got to take a break. Up next, we're going to hear what a Republican senator said today about the racist protesters, a tone that the president is unwilling to take. I'll also speak with Gold Star father.
Trump off the rails, defending racist protesters in a complete about-face, plus condemnation. The reaction across the nation, swift and savage. Is anyone besides the Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke behind Donald Trump tonight? And white nationalists emboldened, threatening more protests. Let's go out front. Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news. The real President Trump raging, railing, and ad-libbing an extraordinary outburst exposing the president's real feelings about the deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. The president of the United States now defending and seemingly advocating for neo-Nazis and white supremacists in a freewheeling and contentious exchange with the media. It was a spectacle, and it completely contradicted what Trump did under great pressure yesterday, which was to condemn hate groups like the KKK by name. Here is President Trump today.
What about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
But sir,
let me ask you this. What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs?
But
do they have any problem? I think they do.
But sir,
so, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day.
You're not putting these protesters on the same level as sir, you're not putting these protesters on the same level as neo-Nazis and Klansmen.
I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now.
So that's why
you had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
By alt-left, the president means those who confronted the racist hate groups over the weekend, the racist hate groups who, of course, had sought the permits for their riot or rally to begin with. Now, Trump was wound up, and the remarks that he made came fast and furious. His staff was watching, arms crossed, as Trump doubled and down.
You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
At every turn, Trump unraveled the carefully crafted message that he read from a teleprompter yesterday. Let me just remind you, because it is so very different, what he did say to the media.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. Those who spread violence in the name of bigotry strike at the very core of America.
Racist hate groups are repugnant, and then he named them neo-Nazis, the KKK. That was yesterday. Today, it was a very different world, Trump blaming both sides. His stunning turn did not go unnoticed by the former Grand Wizard for the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, who tweeted moments after the president's press conference, quote, "Thank you, President Trump, for your honesty and courage to tell the truth about Charlottesville and condemn the leftist terrorists, Black Lives Matter Antifa," which is a reference to anti-fascists. Of course, let's be clear, there was a terror act committed in Charlottesville this weekend by a neo-Nazi. And let's be clear who Trump was defending today when he talked about good people on both sides. Vice, the news group, was embedded with the, quote, Unite the Right, that's the group, on Friday and Saturday in Charlottesville. Listen to yourself what these people were saying. You can hear there the words of Nazis, the torches from the Ku Klux Klan. "You will not replace us." Of course, a reference to blacks, Jews, one or the other, both. So now we know Donald Trump did not mean what he said yesterday when he condemned racist groups by name and called them repugnant when he read off a teleprompter, because the teleprompter was written by, well, we don't know who, but we know today Donald Trump said what he. Sarah Murray is out front in Washington. Sarah, the president's staff, clearly, from your reporting, Jeff Zelany's reporting, had no idea that this was coming today.
That's right, Aaron. This was not the plan today. It caught staff members by surprise, and one White House official told Jeff Zeleny, look, this was all him. This was all Trump. Sources are also telling us that the president has been very irritable over the last 24 hours. He looked at the media reaction to the statement he made on Monday and basically was frustrated that in his mind, the media still said it was not sufficient, that it didn't go far enough. Obviously, that anger spilled out into public today in what was sort of a rambling press conference there, and was much closer to the comments that Trump initially had made over the weekend, equivocating, saying both sides shared culpability with. Now, one person who was frustrated with how today played out, Chief of Staff John Kelly. That's what a source tells me. There are those images of Kelly standing by the newly minted Chief of Staff on the sidelines while President Trump speaks. He has a very stern look on his face. His arms are crossed.
Sarah Murray, thank you very much. And you heard Sarah's reporting. Chief of Staff Kelly is frustrated, along with, it appears, other members of the president's staff. Mark Lamont Hill is a political commentator, BET News host. April Ryan is White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. Mia Malika Henderson is our senior political reporter. And Doug Brinkley is, of course, presidential historian. April, let me start with this. The president's top advisors thought he would, quote, turn the corner today and talk about infrastructure. That is what we were supposed to be talking about. Senior official told our Jeff Zeleny, quote, this was all him. This wasn't our plan. He went off by himself.
He went off by himself, and you saw who the president really was. This president, as we saw for the last couple of days, he's been angry. And as we talked about last night, we saw those tweets that he was attacking and railing against the Merck CEO, who is an African-American. I talked about, wondering what David Duke would say. He played right into what David Duke wanted. This president showed who he was, and now he's promoting or supporting his base. But the rest of America, the vast majority that disapprove, are very much in disapproval. I mean, I talked to various African-American Republicans today who are very upset at this administration and what the president had to say. I mean, I've talked to so many people from so many different corners, people, Jewish Americans who live in and work and have shops in Charlottesville. They're very upset. This president probably will have to come back and address what he means and what he says from today's press conference. Alt-left, just so much. Infrastructure, ACA, repeal and replace, anything right now is not, unless it's North Korea or Russia. Maybe not even that. Right now, this is the story, and this is going to follow him for a while. This is something that this nation has been dealing with for hundreds of years, and this president just opened up a Pandora's box yet again.
Yeah, it was completely off the rails. And you could see with the crossed arms, General Kelly, the stern look on his aides' faces. This is not what they wanted. This is not what they expected. And I think very important, especially when you're talking about General Kelly, as we can see there watching, he had no control over the president.
Right, but in many ways they should have expected this, right? I mean, surely the president has been fuming in public or in private about how he really feels about Charlottesville. Surely they knew that they had to force the president to stick to a teleprompter message yesterday, and they knew he felt very differently. So this idea that somehow this wasn't part of their plan, they send the president out there, and remember, as he's out there, he has his statement, right? At some point he reads his statement from Saturday. So he, it seems, was very much prepared for this, and certainly seemed to sort of relish the moment. So all this sort of notion that they weren't expecting this or they weren't prepared for this, they've worked in this White House, all of those aides, for many, many months, and certainly John Kelly, I imagine, has been privy to what the president has thought really about Charlottesville. So this is just, it's absurd. I mean, it's a dereliction of duty. This idea that somehow they didn't know that,
that he would be able to control his impulses and actually say what he was saying.
Yeah.
Mark, why do you think the president did? Right? We know it took him 48 hours to come out and say the KKK and neo-Nazis were repugnant, racism is evil, all the things he said yesterday. Why did he backtrack so completely and so aggressively today?
Because the president has been fuming, as Malika Henderson said, at the idea that he had to publicly give that statement. What you saw today was a bizarre mix of narcissism and arrogance and denial and good old-fashioned white male rage. He resented having to address white supremacy. He resented having to acknowledge that racism existed and that he may have done something wrong. He does not ever want to be held accountable. And so when he was finally held accountable with that message yesterday, or 48 hours later, he now resented it. And so any question that anyone asked Donald Trump about that topic was going to lead to this.
So was it just that he was mad that he was forced to do something? Or is it that his true feelings on race came out? Which is it, Mark?
You know, I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, on the one hand, Donald Trump isn't really known for having a coherent worldview. Donald Trump says one thing one day, something else another day, whatever plays to his base, whatever plays to the cheap seats, he's willing to do. I think Donald Trump felt like he didn't need to be accountable to anyone and that he didn't do anything wrong. There were moments in the speech, though, where he speaks out about the statue and saying, well, who's next, George Washington? I mean, those are signals, not just about what he thinks about race, which is important, but also signals to his base. He's sending a kind of smoke signal to his base that no matter what I said yesterday or the day before, I'm still accountable to you. I still value you as a base, even though you're the alt-right, and that's the dangerous part.
And I want to play that in just a moment. But first, Doug, let me just talk about the response here from KKK neo-Nazis. Richard Spencer, the white nationalist leader who headlined the rally in Charlottesville, tweeted tonight of Trump, quote, "I'm proud of him for speaking the truth." And again, the David Duke tweet very quickly after the press conference. He says, "Thank you, President Trump, for your honesty and courage to tell the truth about Charlottesville and condemn the leftist terrorists in BLM Antifa." He has gotten praise from these individuals before, but he slammed them yesterday. And then today, back on their side. Doug, what's going on?
Look, Donald Trump blew up like a volcano today. It was an utter disaster of a press conference. He now has zero moral credibility with the majority of Americans, and he's become a bedfellow of people like David Duke in history. We look at Donald Trump at CNN, we keep saying it's unprecedented. What other president, I get asked, would behave like this? No other president would behave like that. Donald Trump is par with people like David Duke, with Joe McCarthy, with George Wallace, with Gerald K. Smith, meaning he's willing to deal in hate mongering, to anything to divide the country. In many ways, Trump supporters are old George Wallace voters. And Donald Trump seems to know nothing about history. He's trying to relitigate today the Civil War. He was weeping crocodile tears for Stonewall Jackson. He didn't seem to understand that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson are in a different category because they served their country nobly than people that were treasonous like Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee.
So let me play that because the president tried today to equate neo-Nazis and counter-protesters. We know that. He also tried to say, though, that what this was about was taking down Confederate war memorials and not about white supremacy, right? Conflating those two issues as well. Here he is.
You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history. You're changing culture.
Doug?
Look, it was nauseating to have to listen to that. You know, I spoke a little bit ago, Aaron, to Mitch Landrieu, the mayor of New Orleans. He'd be on the airwaves, but he's dealing with the flood crisis down in NOLA right now. And he told me these same guys, Duke, you know, all of these neo-Nazi people were there when he took down a Robert E. Lee statue in New Orleans. He gave an amazing speech, Mitch Landrieu, and gave us a kind of a roadmap of how to confront this alternative right movement that is erupting around the country. And I don't think it's a Democrat versus Republican thing going on right now. It's about a fringe group of Americans that have a president willing to speak their language and do their bidding and be a king of nod and winks towards bigotry.
And I want to ask you what this comes to in a moment, Doug. But first, April, let me just, you know, this is just to be clear here. Many Republicans are making it very clear. There is no moral equivalency here, okay, between KKK, neo-Nazis, and counter-protesters. Paul Ryan, the speaker, just said we must be clear here. White supremacy is repulsive. This bigotry is counter to all this country stands for. There can be no moral ambiguity. Marco Rubio, I thought, laid it out pretty beautifully. Took 6 tweets, but it's worth listening, everyone. He starts, the organizers of events which inspired and led to Charlottesville terrorist attack are 100% to blame for a number of reasons. They are adherents of an evil ideology which argues certain people are inferior because of race, ethnicity, or nation of origin. When an entire movement is built on anger and hatred towards people different than you, it justifies and ultimately leads to violence against them. These groups today use the same symbols and same arguments of Nazi and KKK, groups responsible for some of the worst crimes against humanity ever. Mr. President, can't allow white supremacists to share only part of the blame. They support IDEA, which costs nation and world so much pain. The white supremacy groups will see being assigned only 50% of the blame as a win. We cannot allow this old evil to be resurrected. April, at what point does one of the senators, congresspeople, abandon the president for good?
And see, that's the point. These tweets, these words are great. And I'm hearing from so many African-American leaders, people in the Jewish community, they're saying, you know, it's wonderful to say these things, but when are you going to do something about it? And that's the issue. And, you know, I'm going back to the campaign. When this president was running for president, he was using words that were code to his crowd that, you know, make America great. For some people, that was code. Take it back to when? What time period was he talking about? And seeing what happened this weekend, so many people are very upset. Words are one thing, but it takes action to stop this. What kind of action? We don't know. But a lot of leaders are very upset. The words are flowery from Republicans, from Democrats, from whomever. Now it's about action. And the problem, Aaron, is when the president, going back to the issue of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, yes, they had slaves. Okay, we know this. History wrote this. He got that part right. But the issue is the fact that the president is saying these things to help gin up his base so they can keep the fight going for what they want to reclaim. And there is spillage. He is the moral leader, whether he wants to be the moral leader or not. And he says that the economy will fix the race problem and race relations are better. No, it's not. It is worse than frayed. It's divided. His own party is coming out against him.
Nia, does this matter, though, when it comes to his base? I mean, does his presidency end in any way for any of them? Or are you looking at trying to make an argument that 30% of America, whatever his base is, are all racist?
Oh, I mean, I doubt that. I mean, right. I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, it comes down, I think, to this point to tribalism. He's a Republican. Those folks are Republicans. They voted for Donald Trump, in many ways excusing some of his racist and sexist comments. And so I think we'll probably see some of that maintained. I do think those Republicans In many ways, those words from Marco Rubio, I think they're strong, but they're also a little tepid. I mean, let's remember Marco Rubio called Barack Obama one of the most divisive figures in modern history. He said that Obama, when he visited a mosque, was seeking to divide the country. So all of these Republicans have come out with these tweets. Some of them don't even name Trump. He did, and he called him Mr. President, Marco Rubio. So they had very tough words for President Obama, condemning him. I think Marco Rubio once claimed that Obama was trying to destroy the country, and certainly many Republicans were on that bandwagon. So these sorts of, what they're coming out with is pretty tepid, given that the President of the United States essentially just exonerated white supremacists in his statements today.
All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And next, more of our breaking news. President Trump's about-face saying there were very bad people on both sides in Charlottesville. We take a closer look at just who was in Charlottesville, plus strong reaction from both sides of the aisle. Republican Congressman from Virginia, my guest, and more business executives quitting working with Trump, all of them over his handling of the Charlottesville situation. Will more CEOs drop out tonight?
He signed an executive order on the infrastructure permitting process, which changed off of that subject pretty quickly into the president strongly defending his initial response to the Charlottesville violence. It's interesting. President Trump said his statement on Saturday condemning the violence and hatred on many sides, And then his staff spent days insisting that he was condemning the Ku Klux Klan and Nazis and white supremacists, and he was not equating them with the counter-protesters, some of whom obviously were also violent, that he was focusing on the Nazis and the racists who had come into this progressive college town and marched and chanted, saying anti-Semitic things and racist things. And then he went and said the statement that people wanted him to make. He did that yesterday, in which he specifically condemned these groups, the Klan, white supremacists, and Nazis. And then here we have President Trump revealing that actually what he said to begin with was what he meant, that both sides were to blame. Both the Nazis and the Klansmen and the white supremacists and the alt-right and the counter-protesters were to blame. And in fact, not only did he say that both sides were to blame, he said that there were also good people on both sides, not just good people in the counter-protesters, but good people amongst the Nazis and the Klansmen and the white supremacists and the alt-right. It was a stunning tour de force by President Trump. He also talked about the purpose of the march, which was, of course, from these racists and extremists. They were protesting the fact that Charlottesville is talking about getting rid of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. And he said, well, where's that going to end? It might be Robert E. Lee one day, and then next is George Washington, and next is Thomas Jefferson, because obviously George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were slave owners as well. He refused to condemn the alt-right. He demanded that a reporter who asked about the alt-right define what that means. Let's take this in with our panel. It was a lot to see. Sarah Murray, you've been covering President Trump. This is the President Trump, the Donald Trump that you covered on the campaign trail.
It is a sort of freewheeling stream of consciousness president. I think one thing came through. You could see how livid he is at the media for the coverage of his initial statement and then what has happened since then. But the
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? He just indicated that the coverage of the initial statement was completely accurate, that he holds both sides accountable.
Exactly. But what he's mad about is the indication that that didn't go far enough, that he should have said more at the time. And he defended that by saying, you need to have all of the facts before you're going to make a stronger statement. But the reality is that we've seen this president get ahead of the facts over and over again. He did it. He's done it as president. He's done it as a candidate. He has called things terrorist attacks before federal authorities before local authorities will do it, usually when we're talking about radical Islamic terrorist attacks. That is what he calls them. He, in fact, labeled an attack in the Philippines a terrorist attack at the outset, and authorities there still say that that was an armed robbery essentially gone wrong. This is not a president who waits for the facts when he considers it in his mind to be an issue of radical Islamic terrorism. Now, where he struggles, where he fumbles his response, where he equivocates on both sides, is when you're talking about issues of racism, when you're talking about issues of the alt-right. Frankly, when you're talking about people who the president knows in some numbers, not in all numbers, but in some numbers, supported him and helped him get to the White House. And that is where he really stumbles.
Bill, you were on my Sunday show, and you said, presciently, I suppose, that what he said on Saturday was what he meant, and even if he was going to go on and clean it up, what he said on Saturday was what he meant, and you have been proven correct.
Unfortunately, I think so, and I don't think people should no longer be surprised by President Trump in this respect. I was struck by what you said to Sarah at the very beginning. It's exactly what I was thinking, which what we just saw was so reminiscent of candidate Trump, whom you covered. But look, and this, I think in his mind, he was candidate Trump. He said Mexican judge. We all said totally inappropriate. A judge who's born in Indiana, well respected, being attacked for his parents' ethnic background or country background, I guess, national background. He said Muslim ban. We all said totally inappropriate. That helped him, I think, he thinks, in the Republican primaries. And he's still candidate Trump. And it did get him the Republican nomination. It got him against a divided field. He only got 45% of the vote, whatever. He got enough votes to win the Republican nomination, and he threw the inside straight in the Electoral College and won the presidency. But it's that, in my opinion, did damage to the country for a candidate for the presidency of the United States to be saying those things, major party nominee. It's a whole different thing when a president of the United States has the exact same attitude he had as an irresponsible and demagogic candidate, but he does, and we have to accept that, and I don't think that's going to change. And then the question becomes for everyone, the serious people in the White House, the serious people elsewhere in the administration, people in Congress, people in the business community, how do you contain and manage and isolate and lessen the damage Donald Trump does?
Jen, 1 second. I do want to bring in David Chalian, our political director. David, your initial candid response to what we just heard from President Trump.
Well, my initial candid response, Jake, was that this is a president who has lost touch with the country he represents. It's that simple. He's not, by returning to his comments on Saturday, after going through the process of getting all those words in the teleprompter for Monday and clean it up, Saturday was his initial instinct and revealed himself, and today revealed himself further to the American people, and he's just clearly not in sync with where the country is overall on these issues, having nothing to do with ideology, not left-right. This is just not things to be equated. There aren't multiple sides into neo-Nazism. It doesn't exist. And so the fact that the president's instinct is to get out there and continue to dig a hole for himself, while you see that there's not sort of anything he's done in the 7 months of his presidency to sort of expand his reach to represent a majority of Americans, he continues to dig a hole deeper and sort of convene back to his most core base. And I think what you saw today is losing touch with the country he represents.
It's really remarkable, Jen Psaki, because we know from reporting from Sarah and others that the new White House Chief of Staff, retired General John Kelly, was among the staffers urging President Trump, you need to fix.
The president will be stepping behind those microphones there in Trump Tower here in New York to speak specifically on infrastructure. So Manu Raju is live to talk about this ahead of this event here. What are we expecting?
Well, the president just met with some senior cabinet officials, some senior members of his administration, discuss an infrastructure plan. This, of course, will need congressional approval, Brooke, something that's been, of course, difficult for the president to achieve. Now, what will be especially difficult with this plan is that the process they're going to use to try to enact something will require Democratic support in the Senate to overcome a likely filibuster. That means he'll need to get at least 8 Democrats to support if he's able to keep his own party united. Now, most of his party has not seen any details of an infrastructure plan. The president has been promising this for a very long time, but instead they've only gotten a very basic outline of what the president wants to do. This is an issue that a lot of members wanted to focus on early in this administration, not something as difficult as health care The concern is that that all the oxygen may be out of the room after that bruising healthcare fight. Will they be able to turn the page on infrastructure? Uncertain. And one interesting point, Brooke, who was in the room today with the president? Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation, who's her husband, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, of course, was the subject of all those Trump attacks last week. The question is, will McConnell be able to push through Trump's infrastructure plan now that he's putting one together?
I feel like I'm hearing more of an echo from your voice there on Capitol Hill. It is quiet and empty, I know, where you stand. We know Congress is on recess. You're still working, thank goodness. But, you know, everyone comes back in September. Walk us through what September will look like. I mean, we left off with the failure on health care. Of course, the president's attacks, as you mentioned, on the Senate Majority Leader. What does September look like where you are?
It's going to be brutal because of all these deadlines that are coming. Remember, September the 30th is the deadline for Congress to pass an appropriations bill to keep the government open. So they have to do that. They also have to raise the debt ceiling, Brooke, and it looks like the president right now.
Here he goes, Maddow. Thank you. Let's listen.
Great to be back in New York with all of our friends. Some great friends outside the building, I must tell you. I want to thank all of our distinguished guests who are with us today, including members of our cabinet, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, OMB Director Mick Mulvaney, and of course our Transportation Secretary is doing a fabulous job, Elaine Chao. Thank you all for doing a really incredible and creative job on what we're going to be discussing today, which is infrastructure. We've just had a great set of briefings upstairs on our infrastructure agenda. My administration is working every day to deliver the world-class infrastructure that our people deserve and, frankly, that our country deserves. That's why I just signed a new executive order to dramatically reform the nation's badly broken infrastructure permitting process. Just blocks away is the Empire State Building. It took 11 months to build the Empire State Building. But today it can take as long as a decade and much more than that. Many, many stories where it takes 20 and 25 years just to get approvals to start construction of a fairly routine highway. Highway builders must get up to 16 different approvals involving 9 different federal agencies governed by 29 different statutes. One agency alone can stall a project for many, many years and even decades. Not only does this cost our economy billions of dollars, but it also denies our citizens the safe and modern infrastructure they deserve. This over-regulated permitting process is a massive, self-inflicted wound on our country. Disgraceful. Denying our people much-needed investments in their community. And I just want to show you this because it was just shown me, and I think I'm going to show it to the media, both real and fake media. This is what it takes to get something approved today. Elaine, you see that? So this is what it takes. Permitting process flowchart. That's a flowchart. So that can go out to 20 years. This shows about 10.
And rightly being hailed as such for pushing his fiancée out of the way as that car plowed into those counter-protesters in Charlottesville. The couple who...
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. Right now, a quest for healing in a city heartbroken by hate-fueled violence and a country left searching for more moral guidance right now and wondering, where does the president stand? A memorial service is about to get underway as we speak for Heather Heyer, the woman killed while protesting against the white supremacist rallies in Charlottesville this weekend. A woman described as passionate, kind, and a sweet soul and a strong advocate. Today, she is lost but not forgotten, and that is why there's an overflowing crowd turning out to pay their respects and also wearing purple in her honor, her favorite color. Her mother and others close to her say Heather's death reflects the principles that guided her life. The man behind the wheel of the car that barreled into her and many others is now charged with murder. And amid the heartache, a new wave of moral outrage over the president the president's remarks from a member of his own party. I just got this in from Senator Lindsey Graham's office, and I will read it to you now. Mr. President, I encourage you to try to bring us together as a nation after this horrific event in Charlottesville. Your words are dividing Americans, not healing them. Through his statements yesterday, President Trump took a step backward by again suggesting there is moral equivalency between the white supremacist neo-Nazis and KKK members who attended the Charlottesville rally and people like Ms. Heyer. I, along with many others, do not endorse this moral equivalency. Senator Graham goes on to say, many Republicans do not agree with and will fight back against the idea that the party of Lincoln has a welcome mat out for the David Dukes of the world. Finally, my thoughts and prayers will be with the family and friends of Ms. Heyer as they remember and honor her today. That from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, where many Republicans are having a hard time calling the president out by name. Lindsey Graham did just that, just now. We're going to get to that, much more of that in just a moment, but I do want to continue to shine the light this hour on the life and death of Heather Heyer. CNN's Kaylee Hartung. She is outside the memorial service in her honor right now. Kaylee, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What's going on there?
Well, Kate, the Paramount Theater where the service will be held is now full as people coming here are being sent to an overflow area. Governor Terry McAuliffe is inside, Senator Tim Kaine, as well as the mayor of Charlottesville and some of the victims who survived the attack that took Heather Heyer's life. We've just received a copy of the program from our Rosa Flores, who is inside. We've learned we will hear from both of Heather's parents, her grandfather, 2 cousins, the man who hired her to work with the Miller Law Group here in Charlottesville, as well as the Reverend Harold Baer, and Reverend Alvin Edwards will deliver the eulogy as he shared with Anderson Cooper last night the message he plans to share today.
If he was at all concerned about not only her but the 2 troopers who lost their life as a result of that group coming here, you know, if they had not been here, no lives would have been lost. But because she stood up for what she believed, she lived a life of significance and not a life of success. The president has a successful life, but not a significant life, because I don't know anybody he's made a difference in their life like she has.
Heather's parents have requested that no political views be shared in a service today that should be about remembering the life of their daughter. Kate?
And there's so much to remember from everything that we are just starting to learn about Heather Heyer. We'll be taking moments, some of the key moments from this memorial service as it gets underway. Kaylee's there for us. Kaylee, thank you so much. We'll be getting back to Charlottesville and that memorial service throughout the show. Even for a man who based his entire political career on discarding norms and traditions, the collective shock, though, over the president's latest remarks is both extraordinary as it is deep and wide. Americans woke up to these headlines today. The Washington Post's opinion page declaring the nation can only weep. The Chicago Sun-Times editorial calling him America's bigot-in-chief. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is outside Trump Tower right now in New York with much more on what's the view from inside the president's circle. So what is the word from inside the president's circle today, Jeff?
Well, Kate, we have received a tweet just moments ago from the president who's actually focused on what is going on there in Charlottesville. Let's take a look at this a tweet. I believe we have it here. It says, the memorial service today for the beautiful and incredible Heather Heyer, a truly special young woman. She will be long remembered by all. That is a tweet from the president. But Kate, this is something that the president's advisors were hoping he could have talked about yesterday. They were hoping he could have continued his theme of the speech that he began earlier in the week when he was at the White House condemning the acts of hate over the weekend. But instead, we all saw that he took a different approach. He decided to show his private frustration at the criticism of his initial reaction publicly, as we've all seen now. But let's take a quick look at this moment that is still causing so much controversy among Republicans, like you said, Senator Lindsey Graham. It's because of the president saying both sides. Let's watch.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
So there we heard The president saying both sides, both sides. Okay, that is what has frustrated many presidential advisors. They're being very silent about it this morning, I have to say. There's been very little public reaction. One administration official I talked to earlier this morning said this, okay, we have work to do and we're going to do it. But the reality is this has complicated the president's legislative agenda as well. So many Republicans he needs to work with him, and indeed they're supportive of his agenda, simply wish that he